The night my wife left me, I was staring at the bathroom mirror, toothbrush in hand, watching my gums bleed. It was one of those things you ignore at first. I thought maybe I was brushing too hard, or maybe I just needed a softer brush. But the blood didn't stop coming. It wasn't just my gums. I bruised easier. I felt cold when it was warm. My energy dropped like I'd aged 20 years overnight. And then the real blow, acute myeloid leukemia. I was 42. My name is Daniel Reeves, a litigation consultant from Chicago, used to high-pressure days and methodical nights. In courtrooms and behind closed boardroom doors, I deal in strategy, in evidence, in the subtle art of seeing things others overlook. But in my own home, in my own marriage, I was blind. Claire, my wife, is a clinical therapist. We met 12 years ago at a mutual friend's wedding in Atlanta. She wore a green silk dress and quoted Virginia Woolf over champagne. I remember thinking, finally, someone who sees the world the way I do. Someone who listens to what people don't say. And yet she didn't stay. 2 days after the diagnosis, she sent a single text. I didn't sign up for this. No calls, no goodbye, just that message and silence. I reread it so many times I started to hallucinate variations. I can't do this. You'll understand one day. I never loved you the way you loved me. But no, it was always the same. Cold, measured, final. She took her things while I was at an appointment with the hematologist. Half the closet was empty, her books gone, the house suddenly unfamiliar in its new silence. Even the cat, Lola, was gone. That first night alone, I didn't cry. I sat on the couch in the same position for 6 hours. There's a numbness that grief brings. It doesn't feel like sadness at first. It feels like being locked out of your own body. Friends told me not to blame her. This stuff is hard on relationships. People panic. It's a trauma response. But I couldn't buy it. Claire wasn't the panicking kind. She was methodical, almost surgical with emotion. That's what made the text so bizarre. So, out of character. Or maybe I had just been too blind to see the character all along. The first red flag, if I'm being honest, was 2 years ago. We were at a dinner party. Someone brought up the idea of caregiving, specifically a story about a man who took care of his wife through ALS. I remember the way Claire sipped her wine and said quietly, "Some people just aren't built for that kind of life." I laughed it off, teased her about being too clinical. She smiled but didn't deny it. Another flag. She stopped holding my hand in public about 6 months before the diagnosis. Not obviously, but I noticed how her body leaned away from mine in photos, how her replies got shorter. Intimacy became scheduled, sparse, like something to tick off a list. At the time, I blamed stress. We both had demanding jobs. She'd taken on more private clients. I was flying between cities weekly. I told myself every marriage had dry seasons. But now I see it. She was leaving long before she packed a bag. The real fracture began, I think, when I noticed discrepancies in our joint bank account. 3 months before I got sick, large cash withdrawals began appearing. 2,000 here, 500 there. One day, 10,000 gone. Just moving money around, she said. I had trusted her entirely. I managed the investments, but she handled the day-to-day. It wasn't until she left that I started looking closely. One login at a time, one statement at a time. And what I found made my stomach twist. A second account, opened under her maiden name. Transfers from our joint funds into that account, weekly, small enough to avoid alarms but steady. Like clockwork. That's when suspicion gave way to something else. A need. Not for revenge. That's too crass, too messy. What I wanted was clarity. To know why the person I shared a bed with for almost a decade could look me in the eye for years, while building her escape plan in secret. I had nothing else to do. Chemo was starting soon. I'd taken a leave from work. So I made it my mission. Understand Claire. Deconstruct the lies. Rebuild the truth from the rubble. I started where I always do in cases, patterns. Every Tuesday, she'd work late. Client back-to-back day, she said. But I found a receipt, tucked into the pages of a psychology journal she left behind, for a hotel in Evanston. Tuesdays, weekly. The front desk remembered her. She came in with a man, the manager told me, oblivious to the hammer blow he'd just delivered. Tall, salt and pepper hair, drove a Tesla, said they liked the corner suite. So, there it was. But still, that didn't explain the money. Or the file folder I found behind a drawer in her home office. Labeled in her handwriting, Daniel Contingency. Inside were pages I'd never seen. Photocopies of our mortgage, life insurance, my health records, everything you'd need to build a legal case. Or dismantle one. I held the folder in my lap for almost an hour before opening it all the way. And at the bottom, a copy of a power of attorney I never signed. Forged. The woman I trusted with my life was planning for my death. That night, for the first time since she left, I wept. Not for the betrayal, not even for the sickness, but because I realized something horrifying. I didn't know the woman I married. Not really, and I had no idea how far she was willing to go. But I was going to find out. The chemo hit like a freight train. I lost 10 pounds in 2 weeks and most of my hair by the third. My bones ached. My skin peeled in places I didn't think could peel. I'd always believed pain had a threshold, something you could mentally push past. I was wrong. Pain could be a fog, a cage, a living thing, and it whispered to me every night, "You're dying." But I wasn't ready to die. Not yet. Not before I understood what she'd done, why she'd done it, and just how far it went. I'd read The Power of Attorney again and again, trying to find the mistake. Claire was careful. The signature was nearly perfect. Nearly. But she dated it 1 week after I'd been admitted for a minor surgery 2 years ago, during which I was under general anesthesia for nearly 4 hours. I remembered that day well, because she brought me ice chips and made some joke about how I drooled in recovery. That meant she forged my signature while I was unconscious. Or soon after. That small error, that misstep, it gave me something. A crack in the wall. I called a friend, Russell, a private investigator I used to hire for sensitive litigation support. Divorce cases, mostly. He owed me a favor. I didn't tell him everything, just that I had suspicions about financial activity and a possibly fraudulent document. He agreed to dig discreetly. I didn't tell him about the hotel. Not yet. I needed to control how deep this rabbit hole went, for my own sanity. Meanwhile, I kept reading Claire's notes. Yes, she kept notes. Hidden in the same folder, in shorthand only I would recognize. She never imagined I'd find it, or if I did, maybe she thought I'd already be gone. The phrases were clinical, detached. Notebooks filled with little entries like, D's reaction to stress remains hyperrational. Low risk of emotional volatility. Ideal if decisions need to be made under pressure. Discussed insurance policy in Jan. Maintained calm effect. Unlikely to contest updates. March. Began withdrawal trial. No questions asked. Success. It wasn't a diary. It was a case file. And I was the case. The worst entry was from July of the previous year. If diagnosis confirms suspicions, exit plan may need to accelerate. Monitor bank access. Contact L. I didn't know who L was, but I had a feeling it wasn't Lola, the cat. I printed every page and scanned them into a secure drive. If something happened to me, if this illness got worse, someone needed to know. Russell called me back 10 days later, and his voice had the tone of a man who didn't know how much truth I could handle. "She's been planning this for a while, Daniel," he said. He found the second account. Not just savings, investments too. In her name and one other, Logan Pierce. The man from the hotel. I knew that name, a former client of hers. He'd been a high-profile executive who was charged with embezzlement 2 years ago. Publicly cleared, but privately rumored to have cut a deal to avoid jail. He was married at the time, then vanished from the public eye. I remember the case because she was obsessed with it. "There's so much more to him than the media sees," she'd said one night over wine. I'd taken it as professional curiosity. Russell confirmed Logan and Claire had purchased a property together. A condo in Denver. Quiet neighborhood. Paid in full. Claire had flown out there twice in the last 4 months. Work retreats, she'd told me. They were setting up a life. A new one. Without me. Funded in part by me. But that wasn't the worst of it. The insurance company is processing a change to your life policy, Russell said. Beneficiary was updated 6 weeks ago. From Claire Reeves to L. Pierce. I felt the air leave my lungs. She changed the policy before she left, meaning she knew I'd discover everything eventually, but it didn't matter, because if I died, the money still went to him. All she had to do was wait, and maybe, just maybe, make sure I didn't make it. That night, I lay in bed and listened to the beeping of the infusion monitor beside me, the rhythm of survival. And I thought about the last year, how she'd insisted on managing my supplements, my medication. She always brought me my tea, my food, my trust. And I wondered, had she already started? I called my oncologist the next morning, asked for a full toxicology screening, said I was concerned about drug interactions, played it off. They agreed reluctantly. It would take a week to come back. In the meantime, I focused on building my own file. Everything Claire had compiled on me, I mirrored it. Financial records, travel logs, photos, testimonies, even our old texts. I wasn't a man unraveling. I was a man gathering. And that's when I found something strange. A charge on my credit card to a storage facility in Lincoln Park. I didn't remember authorizing it, but it had my name on it. It was opened 3 months before my diagnosis. I drove there, walked in with my ID and fake com, and asked to access unit hashtag 113B. Inside was a small metal locker half full, a suitcase, some boxes, a burner phone, dead, and a ledger, the kind you'd see in a cheap movie about offshore accounts. But the names in it weren't fake. They were real. Lawyers, therapists, executives, some I recognized, some I didn't. Payments, dossiers, and notes in Claire's handwriting. She wasn't just leaving me. She and Logan had been running something, a quiet extortion ring, using private client information, selective targeting, high earners, vulnerable moments, quiet leverage, payoffs to keep secrets buried. And me? I was her alibi, her camouflage, the good husband, the clean house, the everything's fine. Until I got sick, until I became a liability. That's when she texted me. I didn't sign up for this. What she meant was, you were never supposed to figure it out. But I had, and I wasn't done yet. Russell stared at the ledger for a long time without saying anything. We were in my kitchen, the same place Claire used to burn Sunday pancakes and hum along to Etta James records like our life was a goddamn indie film. Now that same kitchen smelled like antiseptic and lemon tea and secrets. This isn't just blackmail, Russell said finally. This is high-level coercion. You realize how dangerous this is, right? I nodded. The implications had been echoing in my head all night like a slow-building migraine. Claire wasn't just a woman who wanted out. She was part of something that could wreck lives. Financial lives, reputations, possibly more. I need proof, I said. Proof they can't bury. Not just for me, for everyone she touched. He hesitated. You thinking law enforcement? Not yet. The second they smell official involvement, she vanishes. She's too smart to leave anything traceable behind without incentive. I need a bigger picture before anyone else gets involved. Russell nodded, reluctant but respectful. He knew me well enough to understand the difference between vengeance and control. What I was building wasn't revenge. It was leverage. That's when he handed me the flash drive. I cloned her burner, he said. Pulled texts, call logs, encrypted notes. You'll want to see this. Back in my office, the screen glowed dimly, casting shadows across Claire's handwriting in the notebook beside me. The texts were chilling, emotionally sterile, businesslike. Everything in her world was categorized. Claire, Client B initiated protocol. He's not responding to guidance. Logan, do we have consent? Claire, it's documented. He'll fold. Logan, if not. Claire, we go with Plan C. His wife already suspects. Each client had a letter, each outcome a strategy. And then I saw my name. Logan, how's the patient? Claire, compliant, still unaware. Logan, ETA. Claire, depends on treatment. Could be 6 months. Maybe less. My heart slowed, thickened. She wasn't just leaving me. She was waiting me out, timing the odds like a countdown. There was even a note from 2 weeks before my diagnosis. Claire, he's still in denial, but symptoms match. Just need confirmation. If he pushes for second opinion, I'll redirect. Redirect. As if I was a project, a variable. They were betting on my body shutting down. I shut the laptop. My stomach rolled, not from chemo, from clarity. The kind of clarity that cuts through grief and fear and leaves only fire. She wanted me quiet, gone, out of the way, and now I had a decision to make. Confront her directly or keep playing the long game. I chose the long game. The next morning I called my firm. Told them I was feeling well enough to consult on a light caseload remotely. They were surprised but supportive. My name still carried weight. I took on one pro bono case, a small matter involving a therapist accused of coercive malpractice. The irony wasn't lost on me, but it gave me cover, access to databases, legal records, professional networks, and in that world I started pulling threads, finding clients Claire had mentioned in passing. Too intense, she'd once said of one woman. Unstable, she'd said of another. Those 2 women I discovered had both signed NDAs. Expensive ones, funded by Logan Pierce's investment firm. Buried in boilerplate clauses, there were hints of settlements designed to silence. Therapy gone wrong, boundaries crossed. Nothing overt, but enough to see the pattern if you knew what to look for. I reached out to one, a woman named Megan Liu, a former client of Claire's. I approached carefully, respectfully, with transparency. I'm not here to re-traumatize you, I said, but I think you may not be the only one she manipulated. Silence. Then a single reply, let's talk. What she told me was devastating. She was charming, disarming, but there were things she did that didn't feel right. She'd call outside of sessions, ask personal questions, suggested we go off record to really help me. I trusted her. She convinced me to transfer funds, told me it was part of my healing. She said I was investing in my own recovery. Megan had lost over $70,000. When she'd started asking for it back, Claire told her she was paranoid, that her mental illness was flaring up. Then came the NDA, a subtle threat. Sign it or risk being labeled unstable. Another red flag, another piece in the puzzle. I documented everything, every timestamp, every dollar. By the end of the week, I had a file, one thick enough to scare even the most confident sociopath. And then, out of nowhere, Claire called. First time since she left. Her name on the screen made my stomach freeze, but I picked up, my voice calm. Daniel. She sounded breathless, like she was jogging or panicking, or pretending to. I heard you've been asking questions. I waited, said nothing. You need to stop. You're not well. This stress, it's not good for your condition. There it was. The concern as threat maneuver. I'm better than you think, I said quietly. Strong enough to make sure the truth comes out. A pause. You don't know what you're playing with. Yes, I do, I said. I'm playing with the truth. You think exposing me will help you sleep at night? She snapped. I think not exposing you is what got me here. She didn't hang up. That was her mistake. Because everything she said after that, every slippery phrase, every veiled warning was recorded. Legally, in the state of Illinois, one-party consent is all that's needed. And I was more than ready to share our little reunion, especially now that the toxicology results were back. Negative for poison, but positive for traces of medications I was never prescribed, anti-anxiety drugs and beta blockers, slipped into supplements, perhaps. Enough to dull symptoms, mask the severity, delay a proper diagnosis. She hadn't tried to kill me. She tried to mislead my doctors. So I think I was just tired, just overworked, just stressed. The cancer was real, but the delay, that was her. She needed me to die slowly, quietly, predictably, but I hadn't. And now I had everything I needed. The next move was mine, and I knew exactly how to play it. It started with a letter, official, Clean. Sent through a third-party law firm I trusted from past work. It wasn't a threat, not directly. It was a request for clarification regarding inconsistencies in Claire's management of marital assets. With a formal notice of pending review for insurance fraud, I knew how to word it. Precise enough to sound serious, vague enough to keep her guessing. The day after it landed, she showed up at my door. I hadn't seen her since the day before she vanished from my life. Her face was still beautiful in that sharp, professional way, all angles and calculation. She looked older, though, or maybe I just saw her differently. You could have called, I said, standing firm in the doorway. I figured you'd appreciate a face-to-face. I stepped aside, wordless. Let her in. She walked into my living room like it still belonged to her, like she hadn't detonated it and walked away with the remote. I don't know what kind of stunt this is, she said, turning to face me. But you're sick, Daniel. You're not thinking clearly. I've never thought more clearly in my life. She paused, calculated. Then you'll understand that you don't want to do this. Whatever game you think you're playing, it won't end the way you want. I'm not playing a game. You are. I held up the copy of the ledger, the scanned pages she never meant me to see. I watched her eyes flicker, just for a second, that micro-expression of recognition and fear. You broke the law, Claire, I said. You manipulated clients. You funneled money through me, and you forged my signature. Her jaw tightened. You don't have proof. I have enough. I have Russell's findings, Megan Liu's testimony, transaction records, and more if I want it. Still, she didn't flinch. Even if you did, think about what you're doing. You're sick. The stress, the publicity. Is this how you want to spend your time? Trying to undo what you did to me? I stepped closer. Yes. I never wanted to hurt you, she said suddenly, the voice dropping an octave, the therapist voice, soft, empathetic. You have to believe that. No, I said. I don't. I could see her pivoting, mentally flipping through tactics, empathy, then guilt, then distraction. I knew the signs. I'd used them myself in deposition prep. You're not going to the police, she said. Not without implicating yourself. That's where you're wrong. I pulled out my trump card, a copy of the amended life insurance beneficiary form, the one with Logan Pierce's name. This doesn't implicate me, I said, but it does paint a very specific narrative. Wife alters policy to benefit lover. Husband falls mysteriously ill. Wife leaves abruptly. That's circumstantial, she hissed. It's compelling. She stared at me, the mask cracking slightly. And then, softly, she said something I didn't expect. You were supposed to die, Daniel. She didn't mean it cruelly. She said it with resignation, like she'd come to terms with it and couldn't understand why I hadn't. You were supposed to fade, quietly, and I would have made sure everything was taken care of. You wouldn't have suffered. I just stared. You always wanted control, she added. But sometimes, letting go is better. You're sick. She smiled, not sweetly. I'm practical. She turned to leave, but I stopped her. Don't run, Claire. Don't make this worse. You're bluffing. I'm surviving. She left and I didn't follow. I spent the next 2 days organizing the file. Russell helped build a timeline. Her relationship with Logan, the financial trail, the NDAs, the false medical guidance, the illegal use of my identity. A prosecutor would have a field day, not just on ethics violations, but conspiracy, fraud, and endangerment. But I didn't send it. Not yet. Instead, I arranged a meeting. Logan Pierce. He agreed reluctantly. I told him I had leverage, and he'd understand it was in his best interest to hear me out. We met in a quiet cafe just north of Evanston. He wore a tailored blazer and sunglasses indoors. The kind of guy who thought charm came with a price tag. Daniel, he said, extending a hand I didn't take. You've been busy. You've been careless. He smirked. Claire told me you might reach out. Said you were going through a difficult time. Let's not waste each other's time. I slid a flash drive across the table. This contains enough to ruin you both. Emails, account transfers, surveillance, Forged documents. All indexed. All duplicated in multiple locations. He didn't touch it. "I'm not here to destroy you," I said. "Not yet. I'm here to offer a deal." He raised an eyebrow. "You're negotiating? I'm giving you a chance to leave the game. Clean. Quiet. You wire everything Claire siphoned, everything back into my estate. Every cent. You dissolve the Denver property. You give me every name she manipulated, every client coerced. And then you disappear." His smile faltered. "You have no idea what she's capable of," he said. "I do," I replied. "I've lived with it, survived it, and I promise you, I'll be the more dangerous one if this goes public." He looked at the drive. "I'll need a day. You have 12 hours. I walked out without looking back. The next morning, my phone lit up. A wire transfer confirmation, 6 figures, followed by an anonymous email, a list of names, accounts, audio clips. Claire's voice on one of them. "They'll never come after me. I'm the safe one. I'm the victim." And just like that, the noose she'd been weaving slipped over her own neck. I forwarded the final files to a federal ethics review board under an alias. Included the ledger, the accounts, the testimonies. And then I waited. 3 weeks later, the news broke. Prominent therapist under investigation for coercion and fraud. Her license was suspended. Her clinic shuttered. Logan Pierce? Gone. Claire called once more. I didn't answer. She didn't leave a message. I watched the fallout unfold quietly from my apartment window. I didn't feel joy. Not exactly. Just peace. Not because I ruined her. Because I reclaimed me. Because for the first time in years, I saw the full shape of the life I had built, and the damage I had allowed. And I chose to stop the bleeding. The world didn't change overnight. Claire wasn't arrested. At least not yet. The investigation moved slowly. Federal wheels grind at their own pace. But her reputation was ruined. Her licenses pulled. Her private practice permanently closed. She was never charged publicly, but quietly word spread. Colleagues distanced themselves. Former clients came forward now that someone else had cracked the dam. Lawsuits began to surface. And Logan vanished. No property, no trace. Maybe he ran. Maybe she did. Either way, they were out of my life. And I was still here. Somehow. The chemo ended 4 months ago. The scans came back clean 2 weeks after that. Remission, the doctor said, cautiously hopeful. A word that doesn't feel like triumph. More like a breath held in suspense. But it's a word I'll take. A word I earned. People talk about survival like it's a victory lap. It isn't. It's a series of quiet mornings. Waking up in an empty bed. Remembering not just who left, but why. Washing dishes slowly. Returning to the gym one day, walking past places that still carry her scent. Learning how to be alone again, and realizing that's not the same thing as being lonely. I started writing again. Not legal briefs. Personal things. Reflections. Memories. One piece got published in a mid-tier journal. Grief in the Mirror. About the way illness strips you down and betrayal finishes the job. I never used Claire's name. Never told the full story. It wasn't about her anymore. It was about reclaiming the voice I'd let someone else narrate for too long. Russell stayed close through it all. We grabbed coffee once a week, more out of unspoken solidarity than anything. I think he understood more than he let on, what it's like to realize the war you're fighting isn't external. It's the voice in your head saying you saw the signs and did nothing. One morning, about 6 months after everything collapsed, I found a letter in my mailbox. No return address, just my name in that familiar, sharp handwriting. Claire. I held it for hours before opening it. When I finally did, it was short, just a page. Daniel, I won't ask for forgiveness. I know you see me clearly now, maybe for the first time. I loved the life we had, but it was never enough. Not for who I really am. You were the best man I ever knew. I'm sorry I ruined that. There was no postscript, no forwarding address, just silence. I didn't write back. Some things don't need closure. Some wounds close when you stop picking them open. I kept the letter for a while. Then one day I shredded it. Not out of anger, out of liberation. She no longer had a voice in this story. Spring in Chicago feels like mercy. Wind without ice. Trees remembering who they are. I found a new place. A smaller apartment on the north side, with big windows and soft light. I wake up and let the sun hit my face, and I think, this is what healing looks like. Sometimes people ask me if I'm angry, about the cancer, the betrayal, the time I lost. I tell them the truth. I was, but not anymore, because anger only keeps you tethered to the people who hurt you. I didn't survive just to keep reliving the pain. I survived to rebuild, to remember who I was before I bent myself around someone else's shadow. I still see her in flashes, in smells, in certain songs, but the grief is gentler now. Less like drowning, more like walking past a photo in a museum. You pause, you feel, and then you move on. There's a woman at my local bookstore, Sarah. She works the register and leaves tiny handwritten notes inside used novels. I found one inside a Hemingway collection that read, "You don't have to be unbroken to be whole." She smiled when I handed it to her. We've had coffee twice. No promises, no performances, just presence. And that's enough. I'm Daniel Reeves, 43 now, alive, free, writing again. Not the man I was before, but someone better, someone honest. And for the first time in a long time, I'm no longer waiting to be saved. I already did that myself.